Hi, my name is Garex Norfiles, and my pronouns are they, them, she, him. I'm trying to figure out a theme song. I'm trying to work it out. I do not know yet. I was thinking something on the lines of ha ha ha, he ha 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 ha. That could be the theme song, right? Or he ha ha ha, he ha 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 ha. Black History and Drag. That's it. Ha 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 ha, ha 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 ha. Black History and Drag. Today, I'm gonna piggyback off of this whole science fiction fantasy genre that I've kind of got going. And I'm gonna talk about someone who is actually immortal. They call this person the mother of modern medicine. Her name is Henrietta Lacks. Her cells, which are known as HeLa cells, contribute to the multi-billion-dollar industry of medicine as we know it. Henrietta Lacks was born to Eliza Lacks Pleasant on August 1st, 1920 in Roanoke, Virginia. She was born in a shack at the end of a street. When her mother died when she was 4 years old, Henrietta and her 9 other siblings were sent down south to live with family because her father just simply couldn't take care of all of them. She moved to the town of Clover, which was said to be just past Difficult Creek near the banks of the River Death, which I feel like relates directly to Henrietta's life because her life would be difficult and yet a part of her would be able to elude death. She moved to Clover to live with her grandfather, who had a 4-room cabin called the Home House, and generations of the Lacks were actually born on the floors of this house. It holds so much history. This house used to be former slave quarters, and just outside the house, there are grave plaques of family members. Her cousin Day was already living in this house being taken care of by the grandfather. They would both work in the fields together, harvesting and tending to the animals. Henrietta Lacks, in the morning, she would have chores. Her morning chores consisted of feeding the pigs, milking the cows, and she would walk 2 miles to get to school. Henrietta Lacks is from a low-income family, and so everybody in the household had to produce in order to keep the livelihood of the household going. At the time Henrietta went to 5th grade, she actually dropped out of school so she could help work on the farm. As Henrietta got older, she was known to be a very kind-hearted woman, and so she got the nickname of Lovey-Dovey. This name was given to her by her cousin named Cootie, who she took care of while he was stricken with polio. Henrietta was a gorgeous woman, and she was said to be the envy of women and the desire of men. She was known not only as a gentle caregiver, but also as a very strong woman. She never complained about anything. I mean, you hear that she had a very hard working upbringing where she worked on a farm. As she got older, when she and her family moved up to Baltimore, in Baltimore, there was a factory culture that was up there because this was during the wartime, so it's 1941. A lot of Black men would work in factories in the jobs that white men would not want to have. These jobs often left Black men exposed to all kinds of potential illnesses, such as asbestos or cancer, and they would bring these particles home with them on their clothing. This brings me to 1951. Henrietta Lacks, she had already given birth to about 5 kids, but she was feeling pain and she was feeling a growth in her uterus. One day she was in the shower and she reaches into herself and she feels this growth in her. She goes to the doctor. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the doctors' names because the focus of the story here is Henrietta Lacks, not so much the doctors who stole her cells. She goes to the doctor, and this is about 2 months after she had given birth to her 5th child. And the doctor finds a growth. The tumor was the size of a nickel. He's thinking there's no way that she could have given birth only a few months prior and the doctor's not noticed a growth of this size. So he takes a sample of this tumor and he brings it to the lab. I just want to give some context to the hospital. Back in Henrietta's lifespan, hospitals were segregated. Black people could not get health care at certain hospitals that were whites only, which would often lead to deaths that did not need to happen. Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, Maryland, where my family is from actually, was one of the few hospitals that actually had a ward that would care to Black and poor individuals. The unsaid transaction that would happen within this hospital, though, was that the people's cells or organs or biomaterial were taken from the hospital to use with experimentation. And because these people were mostly Black who were being served, Black people were having their biomaterial experimented on without their consent. Mind you, this was the age of non-informed consent, just in general. But when you're working with the hospital and understanding the context of the time, where it's the people who do not have access to wealth, who have to go to the hospital and go into this ward, who are predominantly Black, these are the ones who are being experimented on. In a TED Talk, Henrietta's grandchildren would say that their grandfather would always warn them about Johns Hopkins jokingly by saying, make sure you don't walk past Johns Hopkins at night. They'll snatch you up and do some experiments on you. So that also goes to show you about the general feeling and mood towards hospitals during that time. There was a lot of fear and there was a lot of distrust, which was justifiable. Going back to this tumor that the doctor had found. So the doctor took a sample of that tumor, and it was something unlike he had never seen prior, and he would say that he had never seen anything like that afterwards. The tumor was a jello-like consistency. It was purple, it was shiny, it was jelly. He had sent the sample over to another doctor who had been trying for decades to figure out a way to grow cells outside of the human body so they would be able to do experimentations on it, which would then lead to cures and vaccinations. However, every cell that he would try and grow outside of the body would die within 3 days. When he received a sample of Henrietta's cells, he left it in a petri dish overnight. Well, his lab technician named Mary did. And when they came back the next day, they saw that it had multiplied like exponentially. They had to get another petri dish, and by the end of the week, it had about 5 trillion samples of this one cancer cell. He sold these samples off to every doctor who wanted them overseas. Like, these became a hot commodity in the medical industry. Henrietta didn't know. Henrietta was diagnosed with epidermoid carcinoma of the cervix, stage 1, which is cervical cancer. She died later that year of it. Ironically, her cells would be used to find the vaccination for HPV, which is one of the leading causes of cervical cancer. So normal cells have a built-in mechanisms that allow them to divide about 50 times before they self-destruct. This is a process called apoptosis, which prevents the propagation of mutated or genetic errors that creep in after cells repeatedly divide. And just normal human cells eventually die off when they're outside of the body. Let's talk about what happened with the HeLa cells. These cells, not only did they multiply at an exponential rate, they also were hardier than normal human cells. It also was very apparent that these cells did not die. These were the first immortal human cells. These cells have never existed after, and they have never existed before. HeLa is the only one. These cells led to major progress in finding ways to fight deadly diseases such as HIV, polio, and cancer. They also helped to fight Ebola, the measles, mumps. Because of HeLa, we know that cells have 46 chromosomes. They were the first cells to be cloned, and they were also the first cells to be taken to outer space to see how cells interact when they are under zero gravity. These cells are so resilient that they could travel on a lab worker's hand or even on a piece of dust. They could even invade a culture and just completely take over. Sounds like something. These cells led to major advancements in modern medicine. And yet, it wasn't until the 1970s that Henrietta Lacks' family actually found out what was going on. They were struggling with getting just basic health care. So when they found out, they went on a mission to make sure that Black people were able to have dignity and agency, autonomy, and what happened with their bodies. One of Henrietta Lacks' grandchildren gives an anecdote in a TED Talk where she talks about when she was taking her medical exam and they asked if she wanted to be a donor. And the fact that she was even able to get that question asked to her was so significant that she was able to have a choice in whether she would contribute to the advancement of medicine, which she did choose, yes, but the choice is what she had. Johns Hopkins, they let out a statement about whether or not they had received any financial gain from these cells, in which they said no, they had not. So you're telling me that these cells have led to the advancement of an entire medical industry as we know it worldwide, and yet you have not made any money off of it. You made no money. You made no money. Henrietta Lacks literally lives on today through the cells that she has been able to contribute to scientific research. It brings a whole nother meaning to Black girl magic. Even after her death, she is still providing so much care to people all over the world. The fact that we are now in a pandemic, they actually used HeLa cells to find a vaccination. The medical institution is scary. It has a history of denying Black bodies. But with HeLa cells, every day we can rest assured that we are moving into a society where we are able to be safe and where we are able to get the vaccination and the cures that we need in order to thrive. We have Henrietta Lacks to thank for that. Thank you for watching Black History in Drag. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, follow, save. It helps to get all the information out there, and it's very important information, and I know you think so too, or you would not be watching me right now. Thank you so much for tuning in, and please do have an amazing Sunday.